Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of 6 Degrees of Associations. I'm your host, Lucas McCann. With me today, Joanna Panetta, CEO and Chief Troublemaker at Matrix Group. Welcome, Joanna.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
All right, right out of the gate, Chief Troublemaker. Let's get to it. What kind of trouble are you making?
Yeah, that's a good question. I make good trouble. I think that I'm the person on staff who says, do we need to start over? If the client's not happy or if this really isn't the right direction, do we have to scrap this? Or can we take a completely different approach? Or is this really the right thing to be doing? So I think maybe I'm the chief curiosity officer some days, and it feels like trouble because sometimes you have to go back and start over.
Well, it pulls people out of a mindset and and a path forward that they thought they were going down, but it's really, really important. I want to come back to the questioning aspect because I think that's a unique aspect of Matrix Group and really, really vital to any engagement. But I do want to kind of go back in time here. How did you find your way to working with associations?
Well, two things. When I got out of college, I worked for a nonprofit. I worked for the San Francisco Education Fund. And I think few people know this. I think people think, she's been kind of a vendor her whole life, but that's not actually true. My first job out of college, I was a fundraiser for the San Francisco Education Fund. And I was there for a couple years and I raised money for these public private partnerships where it was like, University of California at Berkeley partnering
Mm-hmm.
with the San Francisco Public Schools and the Ford Foundation to do something really cool in math. And that was just an amazing experience. The woman I worked for, Gladys Thatcher, taught me a whole lot about mission, about fundraising, but about, I don't know, managing a great staff and creating this amazing culture. I mean, we would do anything for Gladys. And then after grad school, I ended up working for this tiny bulletin board company called
Mm-hmm.
Business Information Network. And there were two sides to the business. One side was creating private bulletin boards. This is before the internet and before the
Okay.
web, actually. So one side was creating these private networks for the government, and the other side was creating these private networks for associations. And so I basically, wandered into that company and started managing a couple of private networks for associations.
It sounds like you had a couple of good mentors too along the way.
Oh, I've had many, many good mentors. I had a great mentor while I was in college. I was an RA, and the dean of the RAs was amazing. And then I was really lucky. I worked for the same mining company
Hmm.
3 summers in a row in San Francisco. And the woman who was my boss, Grace O'Malley, was absolutely amazing. She was a political science person. I was doing international relations. And it's amazing the influence she had on me. She would talk to me about the stuff I should be reading, how I should think
Hmm.
about the world, how, I don't know, just a whole lot of stuff. She took the time to really talk to me about how the world works and how political risk works. And then when I was at Business Information Network, I had this great chairman, David Forward, who really mentored me and explained a lot of things to me and just kept moving me up and increasing my responsibilities. So I've been very lucky to have people who have guided me and given me a lot of really, really good advice and opportunities.
Yeah, good mentors, great work. I now know why you're in associations. This is kind of
Yeah.
what keeps a lot of folks here.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
We get a lot of good talent from those two metrics. So tell us, current seat, Matrix Group. Tell us more about Matrix Group and the type of work that you all like to get into.
We are a digital agency, and we say that we help associations and nonprofits increase membership, generate revenue, increase engagement, and otherwise thrive in the digital space. And our toolbox is we create amazing websites. We have an association management software called Matrix Max, and we have a virtual and hybrid platform called Bespeak. And then we do a whole lot of integrations and custom workflows. So if an organization comes to us, we kind of want to know what is it that they're trying to achieve, and then we'll create something that's kind of unique for them. So I have some clients where all we're doing is web work, and other clients where we do the AMS and the web work, and other clients where we do a whole lot of custom work to kind of tie all their systems together. So it's unique for each client. And so we're really kind of the digital partner for these organizations. I have an amazing team. Been in business 25 years, Lucas.
Wow, congrats.
Thank you.
A lot of businesses don't make it past 5. That's wonderful.
I've been thinking a lot about this, Lucas, because there have been a couple of companies in our space recently that went poof.
Hmm.
And one of my staff actually said, wow, is this good news for us? And I said, maybe. But on the other hand, it's kind of a cautionary tale, right? If you do not continue to reinvent yourself, if you don't continue to change with the times, it really is true that you stop being relevant. And I tell my team, and we're in a period of right now, but I tell my team that every 3 to 4 years, we have to reevaluate what we're doing. And we have to almost become a pioneer in something new that people need or are about to need.
That's really, really well said, Joanna. I mean, being in the tech space, and I put marketing in this bucket too, but marketing has become kind of intertwined with tech. It's moving and evolving so quickly that, now there's AI that's developing, that's being the developer for you, right? So
Right.
you could create a new platform in a fraction of the time that it used to take you to develop something from scratch. But where that leads you then is more options, which are more is not always better necessarily. It leaves you with almost infinite options to have different platforms for different aspects of your organization. And that's where I think I'm learning, that's where Matrix can come in, is because the integration of those platforms, I've walked into organizations that have 10 different platforms, right?
Right.
Which sounds good because you're specializing in specific areas. But what we talked about before the show is, well, how does that impact the member journey?
Right.
And so it's super, super important from the beginning, from the sales engagement to what I'll call the renewal. And the renewal is not the end, but I'll say that closes the loop, right? Because they're coming back around. And one of the things that I'm learning about Matrix is you ask a lot of great questions, right? So just as you mentioned earlier in your mentor conversation, and how you work with your staff to pull questions out of them. So why is that so important at the beginning? What else can you discover there?
Well, I think you got to know the why, right? So we get a lot of RFPs, and the RFPs will often say things like, we need a new website that has a great search, that is mobile friendly, that has easier navigation. But that's not actually the why behind the redesign, because anyone can give you that. But ultimately, what are you spending 75, 150, $200,000 for, right? Like, we want to know the why. And the why is going to be deeper than that. It's going to be because our business has changed and the website doesn't represent us anymore, or membership is in decline, or we want to reach adjacent markets. And so we have to reposition the organization, or we want to take advantage of some new things that are happening, or, whatever it is. That's the why. And if you don't understand that, you'll end up with, let's talk website redesign, which we do a lot of.
Mm-hmm.
You'll end up with a beautiful new site that's doing exactly what it's doing today, but maybe it's mobile friendly and the navigation's better, right? But the question is, like, if you're about to make this gigantic investment of time and money,
right,
what's it going to do for you to move the needle? How is it going to drastically improve the member experience, help you increase membership, or help you retain members? So that's the why. We actually have, Lucas, we have a set of company fundamentals.
Mm-hmm.
There's 26 of them, and that sounds like a lot, right?
That does sound like a lot.
It's a lot. And one of our company fundamentals is be curious. And it's in our vocabulary. We talk about being curious, and somebody will say, not just me, but somebody will say, well, let's get curious about that. So what does that mean? It means going deep. It means really understanding the why. It really means understanding the guts of what we're getting into. And I find, at least, that the greater the understanding of my staff, the more helpful they are to the client. And it's not always about generating more revenue. In some cases, it's actually generating less revenue because we don't need to do as much.
Right.
But ultimately, if I have happy clients who say, wow, because of what you did, my renewal rate is higher, the open rate on my email is better, or clients aren't complaining about the website, then we get the renewal. We get the next project.
Be curious.
So you got to understand the why.
Ted Lasso-ish, but
yeah.
It's perfect too, because again, as a vendor, we get the same thing. We get people that come to us and say, well, we need this. And to your point, if you don't ask the why, they're coming in with just a fraction of the information, right? You may not be even sending them in the right direction.
Well, also, what they need may not be what they just told you.
Right.
You've probably run into that where I had a client that actually said to us at one point, they said, we need to increase meeting registration, so we need to rebrand. And wow, after doing some research, we said, wow, rebranding is actually going to be the opposite or give you the actual opposite results, because what will happen is there's going to be confusion in the marketplace about who the
Right.
heck you are. If you're changing your name, changing your branding, there's going to be a time where people don't know who you are. So the people who maybe used to come to your annual conference don't even know that your annual conference has changed. So is this really what we're trying to do? Like, you rebrand for a completely different reason than increase meeting registrations.
Right. And if people are coming in making a change, right, who makes a change to be exactly who they are today, right? You
Right,
change something
right,
because you want
right,
to be something different.
right,
And if you don't explain how I'm trying to be different, what I'm trying to change, maybe what's broken, but more importantly, where are you going? Why are you changing AMS? Why are you changing your marketing platform? You don't get to that, and they just say, well, we need to make a change.
right, right. And I think, but here's the challenge, right? Organizations say we need to change, but they sometimes can't articulate the change, and I totally get that. Like, we've had that situation where I'm like, I just don't know where we need to go, but I know that we need to do something. So what I find is often implementing a new database or redesigning a website or something serves as a proxy for the conversation about who you want to become. And so
Mm-hmm.
they don't know yet, and I think that's totally fair, but if you have a good process in place, you get there together.
Yeah.
But it takes some time, and you do have to give yourselves the time and space to have conversations about what this is going to be. And so, like, I was working on a project for one client, and we were doing a whole bunch of member interviews, and the member interviews were really surfacing a lot of stuff that when we brought it to the association, they said, wow, this is really interesting. Can we step back, think about how this will impact the project, change the project, and then, even though the budget didn't really increase, but it changed the direction of the project. But it was for the better because they gave themselves the time and space to really think about what the members were saying.
Yeah. We talk a lot internally about being consultants. It doesn't matter if you're in marketing, if you're in sales. I want everybody to think of themselves as consultants. And the difference is consultants listen a lot, right? It's required for you to be a good consultant, because I can't tell you what the answer is unless I understand what the problem is. And so I encourage them to really ask a lot of questions, be curious. I'm going to use that. I love that. Everybody should be curious. And really understand holistically. And even if it's not related to sales, for example, you should be making the recommendation, the observation, and sharing that information, not only because it's good to, as the consultant, that we're sharing valuable insight, but I think it builds what you also talk a lot. It builds trust. And
It
even
does,
just
right?
asking the question and being curious is innately building trust, because I'm asking you questions. It means I care. Right.
Right, right. Well, it's funny. Sometimes my staff will say, Joanna, how do you get people to tell you everything? And I'm like, I don't know. They just tell me everything. And so we'll go into a meeting, and you know what I ask the client? Hey, what's new? What's going on? And then I shut up. And it's amazing. They tell
Mm-hmm.
me everything because they're like, oh, let's see. I don't know what's new. Oh, we have a new foundation, or we have a new member type, or, we just whatever. And because it's such an open ended question, people tell you and they share, and they're excited about what's happening at the organization. But if you're so tactical and so focused on a specific thing, you're only going to ever know about that specific thing.
Right. And it keeps you in the silo. I mean, and
Right.
what you're doing, which to them may seem very siloed and specific to a system, or even these systems, listening to those other things that are going on within the organization, you can then start to create bridges,
Yes.
even if it's just conversations, communally bridges, and not technical bridges, right? But that can lead to some really profound findings and direction changes.
100%.
Yeah. And I like the idea of also the example of trust that you can give to the associations, because we were questioning again before the show, like, where are these associations um, in their spectrum of trust, and how can they build more trust internally and then with your members? I mean, what are some things that you see associations doing well in that area?
Well, I'll tell you, the whole issue of trust is something I'm deeply, deeply concerned about, actually. I mean, I was listening to the news today and I had to turn it off because I thought, oh God, this is only going to make me ill. And it's dividing us. And when we're divided, we don't trust each other, right?
Right.
And I would hope that within the associations, the thing that brought them together in the first place helps them overcome maybe some other divisions that they might have had. But what I am concerned about is that, one, institutions that in the past we trusted, we no longer trust. We don't trust the experts, or we question the experts. And so think about associations. They have often been seen as places where the experts gather. They've also been seen as the voice of a specific profession or industry. And when you're the voice, presumably that's because you have a certain amount of expertise that allows you to be the voice. So if we're less trusting of these institutions, what is happening then to I guess, the prominence of associations and their ability to influence and educate? I don't have any answers, but I am concerned about this. And I'll tell you what some organizations are doing well is they're having, first of all, the conversation with their leadership about, is trust an issue in our profession or industry?
Mm-hmm.
So they start at the board level. And then they look at the membership to see, are there trust issues within the membership, or are there trust issues between our members and who they serve? So let's take an obvious one, the media.
Mm-hmm.
As far as I can tell, the associations that represent the media are trusted by their members, but the media is less trusted. So
True.
then what happens there is, do these associations that serve the media, or bring them together, what can they do to help their members shore up their trust? And what I'm seeing is, at least again, starting with conversations, but I'm also seeing things like toolkits and language and messaging, so that then they're essentially saying, hey, we know that trust is an issue. Here's what we're seeing that's working. And it's interesting because I moderated a panel on this, and there were some associations that said, wow, is this really our place?
Mm-hmm.
But the members are saying, well, it may not be your place, but it's needed. So who else is going to do this? You're the organization that really represents the largest concentration of our members. Who else? Plus you're unbiased, objective, etc. Very interesting. I think the other thing that I would say is organizations that are even monitoring this issue to see if it's becoming more or less a problem are probably doing their members a big service, because they at least know that it's happening.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's so many outlets and options, and it's difficult to how do you build the trust with a news outlet, for example, right? And that may be reporting on your industry now and something else later, and so on and so forth. And there's a lot of options out there, and not just national media, but then there's social media, which becomes a lot watered down really quickly.
Right.
And you tend to follow the ones that you trust.
Right.
And the association industry just has such an opportunity to be the outlet, because again, when it all started, when the social medias of the world launched through the internet, it was this almost backlash of, well, maybe we don't need associations. And there was some fear that, oh, my influence will be gone because they could get this information about the industry elsewhere. But I believe it's come full circle that it's just so watered down out there that you don't know who to trust. And the association has the opportunity, it does, if done well, in a genuine sense, to be that voice and trusted advisor.
I agree. And I think that associations actually have to assert that they can be trusted. And it sounds really obvious, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think that what they need to absolutely assert over and over again is, we are a place where these divisions maybe even are welcomed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we want to have a conversation about the different, whatever the different trends affecting our industry. And we welcome the conversation and we welcome the different perspectives. So come on down and
Mm-hmm.
we'll treat you with respect, and you can trust that we will handle this well. But I think they need to kind of raise their hand and say, remember, we're the trusted partner in helping to guide these conversations, instead of just doing it but not saying it. I
Right.
think we got to say it. I'll give you a dumb example. Many years ago, we were doing a project and there was a line item for training. And we did the training. And then at the end of the project, the client said, "You didn't do the training." And we said, "What do you mean? We did all these meetings." And they said, "Oh, those weren't trainings." And we're thinking, oh man, we didn't call them training. So now we're very clear, this is your training. And then the client knows that we're training. And that sounds dumb, but you have to label it sometimes so that then people kind of know how to react and they check it off as being what it is.
Yeah, specificity and communication are just key factors to all of this. I mean, again, you could build the biggest, best strategic plan in the background, but you have to share it, and you have to
Yes,
be
that's true. And you
assertive,
have
and
to
you have
live
to
it.
be specific, and then you have to live it. And then you have to revisit, like any other good strategic plan, and listen um, along the way. Yeah. Well, let me switch gears because I really want to hear about the concept of the membership cliff, as you call it,
Ah.
and why we should be at least aware, if not scared, but aware.
Yeah, so this is something that started bubbling up on my podcast, Associations Thrive, where one association, the American Translators Association, the then executive director, I think CEO, said, "Hey, we surveyed our members and we found that something like 40% are retiring in the next 4 years." And then Michael DeFrisco from the American Academy for Cosmetic Dentists said, something like 40-50% of their accredited members were going to retire in the next few years. And the accredited members are the most valuable, the most likely to renew, the ones who are, in leadership positions, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
So this started bubbling up. I talked to many executive directors, CEOs in healthcare, and they said, wow, we're seeing a wave of retirements from the nurses. We're seeing, so this just, on and on and on. And I thought, oh my God, like, do associations track this? And what are we doing if all of a sudden in the next 3 to 4 years, there's going to be this cliff? And I started getting curious about this. And I think there's several trends really affecting this or kind of driving this big thing that I'm calling the membership cliff. One is just the boomers. They're going to continue to retire, right?
Yep.
But like in the next few years, the boomers will be largely gone. It's actually the Xers.
Mm-hmm.
And from what I have read, the Xers actually are retiring earlier
Mm-hmm.
than normally they would retire. And some of that is driven by the pandemic. And they were a big part of the Great Resignation.
Right.
So another factor is just that we're making fewer babies and we're not letting in as many people, which means there's not as many people entering the labor force. There's going to be just millions of unfilled jobs by 2030. I mean, it's a crisis. And I'll tell you, that's another theme in my podcast, which is workforce.
Yeah.
Like almost every CEO says, we just don't have enough people. We don't have enough people in construction, in healthcare, in grocery stores, in book publishing, everything. And then the fourth trend is private equity. So private equity is coming into spaces, buying up practices, and saying we don't need to join the associations, or they're reducing the workforce, or they're
both.
providing their own training,
Right.
and basically saying we don't need the training and certification being provided by these professional societies. So all of these trends will more or less affect a whole lot of these industries and associations, some in very big ways and some in small ways. But I'm kind of raising the alarm and saying, do you even know this is happening?
Mm-hmm.
And are you surveying your membership? Are you tracking these trends so that you can do something about it? And the do something about it could be working really hard to get more people into the profession, or it could be working really hard to get the ones that haven't joined to join,
Mm-hmm.
or it's developing new relationships with private equity, relationships that maybe you've never had in the past, so that they understand your value. So the strategy is going to be different for every association, but it's here. It's not even just coming, it's here.
Yeah, the boomers retiring, I think that's like been in the national news.
Exactly.
Right? Everybody knows that was happening. We've known it for decades.
Right.
But the two things, one, it was less understood what the boomers retiring, aging out, and maybe some aging out and transferring wealth to Xers And so some of the Xers, as you said, coming out of COVID, or just retired, the Great Resignation, some of them are being transferred wealth and just go, well, I can retire 10 years earlier. And so I
Exactly.
thought there was an acceleration where you thought there was
Exactly.
going to be a generation of Xers that would kind of fill in the gaps for another decade and a half.
Yes.
And that dropped off significantly. And so that leaves a gap in this C-suite. And then I 100% see, we see this, and it impacts associations in lots of ways, but the private equity mergers and acquisitions, they come in, they buy, they gobble, two organizations, they smash those together, and then 1+1 does not equal 2 on the membership side.
Right.
Because as we know, those antiquated membership pricing models will cap it. And
Right.
as 20 years ago, it sounded fine. We'll never get to those caps. Those are so far in the future. Let's just lock it in right now. And then here comes growth, inflation, the economy. You put 2 of the big ones together, and bam, 1+1 equals 1
Right. And
for
all of a
membership.
sudden, you just lost dues from a major
Oh,
member because they got gobbled up by another and there's a dues cap. Or they say, we're so big that we really shouldn't be paying this dues. Or they'll say, where maybe 10 people used to come to the conference, but they smashed those 2 companies and now only 5 people are going to come to the conference.
right. Or it was 2 conferences and now it's 1 conference. We're
Right.
just going to consolidate
Right.
everything. Yeah, it's really difficult. And there's the balance, right? You said it. Like some would say, well, I'm so big, why should I have to pay that much? And then on the lower end, you're still trying to make your way up on that other side.
Or, Lucas, the other thing that's happening is some of these industries become so dominated by the large players that their agendas are so different from the smaller players that now you're creating a conflict in say, the ledge agenda
Mm-hmm.
or the member benefits that the organization wants to provide. Not always, but I've seen it.
Yeah. I mean, even in our industry, it became such a strategy, right? There were AMS companies whose whole business model was to build up to a certain point of membership and clients and sell to a larger agency on the AMS side. That was literally the strategy from day one, and they executed and it worked well, but it was never, I want to build a company and do something and differentiate myself. It's, I can see they're doing this. If I do this same thing and just add customers, they'll acquire me down the road. That's become a common strategy.
Doesn't work for me.
No. What's the strategy?
At some point, I got to figure out, what I'm going to do with this thing. But for right now, there really is a thrill in making a difference. And I know it sounds totally corny, but when a client says, wow, this totally moved the needle for us, or we're able to do this now, or this impacted our membership in this way, like there's real pride, in having done that.
It doesn't sound crazy. And I, from hiring folks in the industry, I actually see it as an opportunity for associations, as you pick down at Gen X millennials, who very much have the idea in their mind that they want to do mission-driven work. I mean, where else, other than the association market, can you do great mission-driven work that isn't volunteer work, right? There are jobs in the association market where you can make a real difference for an association. And okay, you're not going to make $1 million necessarily. You're not in the super private sector, Fortune 100. That's just a different game. You're there in a for-profit race where this is a mission-centered, focused industry. I see that as an opportunity, at least for staffing on the association side and even on the supplier vendor side.
Yeah.
Well, I want to ask you, switch gears and ask you some fun questions if you're open to that, Joanna.
Absolutely. Let's talk fun.
Okay. Well, what's something I typically ask? What's something on your calendar? I don't want to date the episode to say where we are in the year, but next year, it's something that's maybe already on your calendar here, and it doesn't move. It's rock solid. It's no pencil. It's in there with a big Sharpie, and is the first thing you put up there.
Well, I'll tell you the thing that will never move, or I don't know about never, but for now, is the week of Thanksgiving, we go on a family trip. Every year, my staff knows, don't even think about, expecting me to be in the office. We go away. Sometimes we go with friends, but we go away as a family, and we always go somewhere overseas. And I find, Lucas, that the sense of adventure and the being away just means that nobody's focused on their regular life. I'm certainly not thinking about the office. And you know what it does? It knits the family together because, like my boys, for example, they're buddies when they're on
Yeah.
these trips. They're not always buddies in real life,
I
but
was
on
one of
these
three
trips
boys.
we
I know.
are. Yeah, you totally know that. And I feel like it knits us back together for the rest of the year. So that's one thing that is always on the calendar. And then since the pandemic, I now also have a week in July where I go away on a girls' trip with 3 college buddies. And the minute we come back from that trip, we pick the week for the next week so that I know I have 2 really fun trips, for the coming year. And it's something to look forward to. And they're like magic. They're just really fun, and they keep me going. And for me, international travel makes life worth living. So I'm just super excited. This past year, my family went to Italy for Thanksgiving, and I went to Lisbon with the girls.
That's wonderful. What else is in those trips? Just give me one or two of your top 5 locations.
Well, let's see. One of my top 5 would have to be Cambodia. Seeing Angkor Wat is just amazing. It's like from another planet. It's just a wholly different place from how many centuries ago. It's not that hard to get to anymore. It was when I went, but it's just a really, really amazing place. Another amazing place is Vietnam.
Hmm.
Amazing how diverse the country is, and you really see how the Americans impacted this country. They like Americans, by the way, but man, the culture, the food, the sights, amazing place. I would say, okay, this is another Asian place, but Japan is amazing.
Okay.
And everywhere you go in Japan, it's going to be different. Like I've been to Japan, 4 times now, and I'm like, oh, and we're going to go again in March, and I feel like, okay, where am I going to go this time? That's going to be new and different and amazing. And the Japanese have this amazing sensibility that you will not find anybody else. That's related to kindness and order and precision and peacefulness. I mean, Japan is clean and it's orderly. There's
I like
very
it
little
already.
crime. It's just, but there's also this very uniquely Japanese aesthetic that is just evident everywhere, from the clothing to the architecture to the artwork. And you see that it comes from centuries of really honing this design aesthetic. And then, of course, France, right? I speak French and I studied in France, so I'll always go back to France and explore a different part of France, whenever I can.
All right, Joanna Pineda, travel expert also. That's what I've found. Well, speaking of, you mentioned art. Tell us about your art behind you.
Oh, these are my Mongolian warriors.
Okay.
I bought them at, I think it was Art on the Avenue in Del Rey in Alexandria. There's a Mongolian artist who lives in Alexandria, and I had admired his work for many years. And first of all, they're originals and they're absolutely gorgeous.
They are.
But check them out. The riders are facing each other, but the horses are facing the same direction. So you've got one rider who's riding, backwards. And I just love them. I have a lot of Asian art in my house, talking about these trips. I'm Filipino American, and my husband and I have traveled quite a fair amount in Asia. I love the aesthetic. I have art from a lot of different countries in Asia.
They are beautiful. I really like them. I'll have to check that out. Well, you're an open book, I say, Joanna. Like, you can go to your website. You already tell us lots of there's actually fun facts listed on your website, which I think are wonderful.
Which I think are outdated, but oh well. I got to keep updating that.
I think you still know Taekwondo. In fact, I know you know Taekwondo because I learned some on the Association Chat bus to ASE Annual. I learned
that's
some
right.
From you.
Yep.
I knew, and I believe you still like purple. We talked about your purple wrapped car.
Yes.
Which maybe we'll have to post a picture of that with this episode when it goes out. But tell us something about Joanna that's not on that website. If we, maybe can't find, but would be really, really difficult to find out.
I don't know that this would be difficult to find out because it is on Facebook, but I have a 1,600-day streak on Duolingo.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I just do a little bit every day. it turns out microlearning works. Just a few minutes a day of Italian or French or something really works. I'm never going to be fluent in Italian, but when we went to Italy this past November, it was amazing how much I was able to understand and speak.
How many languages that put you up to?
5.
Okay. That's amazing. Okay. How long has Duolingo been out?
That's a good question. I don't know. Quite a bit of time.
Okay.
If you're curious about Duolingo, the guy who started Duolingo is also the guy who put out reCAPTCHA.
Oh,
Louis Von On, I think. And there's an episode of How I Built This with, I think it's Guy Raz.
mm-hmm.
That's absolutely amazing. He started reCAPTCHA when he was in college. And I think the New York Times ended up using reCAPTCHA to basically digitize the archives of the New York Times. And the college apparently got wind of this and was like, whoa, 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 you can't be like running this like multi-$100,000 a month business out of your college dorm. And then he started Duolingo, and Duolingo is like the largest language app, I think, in the world. And I love it. They've gamified it. It's really fun. I think it's really effective. I love it. Now I'm doing Korean.
My 15-year-old has it on his phone, and he'll just, he'll walk around with his earbuds in and learn a new language. It's great. I think exactly what you said, the gamification, and that it's fun, and it's intuitive and, easy, so to speak.
Totally.
Yeah.
I'm doing Korean, which is really hard.
Oh.
And I think I'm going to have to take a class. I didn't have to take a class for Italian, and I think the French background probably helped me. May have to take a class in Korean, but I know the alphabet. I can read. I know how to say a few things in Korean. Not
That's
bad.
Wonderful. You can get around.
I don't know about that, but I can say hello and how are you and, more water, please.
There you go. Well, this one's fun, maybe a little bit more difficult, broader. But if I were to, hand you a magic wand, what would you potentially change about our industry? And it could be, I'll help. This could even be, I would amplify something that's already good that could be better. Maybe it could be something that doesn't have to be a positive to a negative, or negative to a positive. It could be something that is positive, but we would broaden it. This one is harder because I also didn't tee you up for this.
Yeah. No, I've been thinking a lot about this. Again, this comes from my podcast. This is one thought. I interview, every week an association exec, and almost every single one of them fell into the association business. Mm-hmm. They were like, a bunch of them said, wait, the recession happened and I had to find a job. And then a bunch of them temped for an association and said, what is this thing called associations? And then maybe they had a family member who said, can you do some work for me? So if I could wave a magic wand, I would love greater awareness of what associations are and the impact that they have, and more people seeing that it's a really quite an amazing, thriving profession potentially that more people would consider, so that then we kind of have a larger pool of people, to who would consider this profession. Because, you probably run into this where I'll be at a party and somebody will say, oh, you work with associations. And they think, oh, these cute little associations, right, kind of doing little things, but they're not. I mean, like, there are associations that are doing amazing things and impacting whole industries and saving lives and changing communities. Why don't we know about them, and why aren't their stories more mainstream? So that's maybe one thing that I would say. I also think that I think maybe, and this is maybe a little bit more controversial, I'm wondering if maybe the governance of some associations needs to be rethought a little bit. As in, like, again, this is borrowing an idea from someone on my podcast who said, I don't think that my board should be made up of just members. I think that we need other voices so that then we bring in different perspectives. And I thought that was really radical and a great way to think about, again, bringing different perspectives so that the board can then make better decisions. So I thought that was really interesting to kind of explode how we think about governance and decision-making within the board of these associations. Yeah,
that's fascinating. I agree with you, going back to the awareness piece. And I thought about, how there was sort of a notion of, hey, nobody teaches kids personal finance, right? It's like we need more curriculum around personal finance before they launch out into the world and spend every last dollar they have or run up a credit card. But maybe in the same right, there somebody can push a curriculum on associations, because I agree, it is the smallest business with the greatest impact that I could possibly think of. I mean, think of
Right.
another organization with a staff as small as most associations are that have as great an impact
Right.
on globally. It's incredible when you think
Yeah,
about
but
it.
also think about this, right? Like when we think about special interests, we usually think negatively when we
That's
say think of special interests. And yet, so right now, for example, and hopefully this doesn't date the episode too much, we're talking about tariffs,
hmm
right? That's going to have a really wide-ranging impact on different industries. Some industries will benefit in the short term. I'm an economist, so like I have a degree in economics, so it's going to be
as
in the
do I.
short term,
Yeah.
right? And then there are going to be some industries that will get hurt right off the bat. So those associations will make it their mission to educate Congress and say, look, if you do this, this is how my members who live and work in your district will be affected. Those are special interests who end up educating and making the process better.
hmm
Because otherwise, these things happen in a vacuum. And so we think about special interests as just like these big, maybe PACs, but really, three people who represent an industry could be educating Congress and helping them to not make bad decisions. So it's part of the process that our founding fathers set up, right?
Yeah,
That you band together and you say, you know, hear us.
absolutely. Well, we're gonna leave that one right as the last nugget of food for thought. Joanna, it was an absolute pleasure talking to you. I know folks will come talk to you, find you. We'll post all your contact information with this episode, and check out the Matrix group as well. Before we go, Joanna, may I ask, is there somebody in your network you think our audience would benefit from hearing from?
I think you should interview Vince Tolucci. I've interviewed many execs on my podcast, and I obviously interact with a lot of organizations as well as, a lot of vendors. Vince Tolucci is CEO of the International Association of Chiefs of Police. Of all the podcasts that I've done, his first interview with me is the single most popular in my entire catalog. He's a thoughtful CEO. He has a lot to say about his association and where it's going. And the other thing that you might find interesting is law enforcement is at the center of everything. And we look to law enforcement to
hmm
solve a lot of society's ills, but it often can't, right? Like
Right.
a kid's truant, you call the police. Someone's beaten up on his wife, you call the police. You get robbed, you call the police. Some of
Right.
these problems police can't actually solve, but we look to them. And then, there's obviously very divisive opinions about law enforcement, and he's at the center of it, and just an incredible, thoughtful leader.
That's wonderful. And you're right. Law enforcement can show up and address something in the immediacy, but it's not always going to solve the problem, so to
Right,
speak. So
right.
that's I know you've talked to a lot of association execs on your podcast. So to pick one out as a top, that's quite of a tip to the hat to Vince. So we will certainly
I
reach
know it's
out.
like, picking my favorite child, but
I know you always have lots of favorites.
I know
That's
I
tough.
have so many people that I would recommend. So tap me in the future.
Will do. Will do. And thank you again, Joanna, for the time.
This was a pleasure. Thank you.